Monday, Memorial Day, May 30th, 2022. The sky over Clearview Lake looked scrubbed clean, and the mesquite smoke drifted in slow blue ribbons along my porch rail that still smelled of lemon oil. My son leaned back in my chair, crossed an ankle over a knee like he owned the view, and let a smile cut across his face. "You do not live here anymore, Dad. This house is ours." Those were his exact words. I stood there with the paper plates, the relish tray, and 5 kinds of mustard, like a waiter at my own party, and said nothing. Silence is my native language when something breaks. I am Richard Hale, 66 years old, widower, builder of quiet plans. If family greed has ever blindsided you, write your city in the comments. And if you want to hear how a whisper can be louder than a scream, subscribe now to catch the surprise. Because by the time Saturday reached 2:02 in the afternoon, they thought they were moving in. What they did not know was that this house had teeth. Set the scene right. Clearview. Lake Villa sits outside Phoenix, Arizona, on a gentle slope of scrub and stone that ends in a short dock. The neighborhood is governed by a homeowners association tied to the lake. It is the kind that cares about dock lights and lawn heights, and whether your recycling bin actually matches the issued color. I used to make jokes about it. In the week that followed, those rules would become a quiet lever in my favor. Inside the place is more practical than grand pine floors, a long table that my wife Caroline insisted must fit 8, and the picture window she called her daily chapel, because light turned the water into a stained glass mood ring at sunset. Caroline has been gone for years now, but there are mornings when I still reach to pour a second cup and catch myself mid-motion and hold the cup in the air like a man who forgot how to finish a sentence. Protecting this home is the one promise I refuse to break. Ethan arrived with his wife Madison and her parents Gerald and Patricia Monroe in a newish sport utility vehicle, one of those oversized ones that looks like a smooth brick. I know exactly what it cost because I paid for most of it. Over the last few years, I covered a down payment when their rent spiked, fronted a deposit on a short-term apartment after a lease dispute, and picked up more temporary expenses than I like to admit. By Memorial Day, the running total I could prove came to $43,000. That number matters. It was not everything they wanted, only the portion I had let slip from my account into theirs like sand through a fist. People will say, why keep paying? Because fathers try to believe the next ask will be the last. Because love often looks like a bridge, and you forget bridges are supposed to have tolls. Madison kissed the air beside my cheek, perfumed and brisk. Patricia ran a finger along my porch railing and said, "Still doing your own oiling, Richard." How quaint. Gerald gave me the handshake of a man pretending to be gentle. Ethan took his place, said the line about me not living here, and then followed it with a deadline. "Saturday," he said, pointing with his chin toward the front door, "we will be moved in. We will bring a truck after lunch." He said it like management assigning a maintenance task. Madison lifted her phone and swept the camera across the living room, narrating where our pieces would go. The way she said our tasted like theft. I did not argue. I asked if anyone wanted sweet tea. Patricia laughed and asked if I could make mine less old-fashioned next time. That is the thing about being labeled the boring one in your own family. They think you will never change the script. They count on it. I carried the tray inside and set it down next to the sink, where a faint line in the grout marks the day Caroline and I installed the farmhouse basin, and I dropped a level and swore, and she laughed, and then we redid the line until the bubble settled true. I can still hear her laugh in the tile. While they toured what they had decided was theirs, I checked my watch. I was already counting down. Memorial Day. Monday, then Tuesday, then Wednesday. We were 5 days out from their move-in fantasy. Here is something important, and I'm telling you now, so the timeline never leaves your head. On Sunday, I would sign a deed. On Monday morning, the county recorder would enter that deed into the index. A few hours later, on Monday late morning, we would meet at a law office downtown for the conversation they thought would end with my keys in their hands. And on Tuesday afternoon, a photograph would travel farther and faster than any lawyer ever could. I'm telling you this because it turns a family power play into a clock you can hear ticking under the dialogue. Once you hear that clock, you cannot unhear it. Back on the porch, I handed out drinks, thanked them for coming, and played the gracious host. Madison slid a folder toward me, shopping lists, mock-ups, a plan to modernize. She talked about refreshing the primary suite and making space for a nursery sooner rather than later. Ethan bumped my shoulder with his as if we were teammates. "Do not be stubborn, Dad. You will love the guest room we have in mind for you at our place, closer to the city. Less upkeep." Patricia performed concern and said, "This is about your comfort." When I did not reply, Gerald filled the silence with the chuckle of a man already counting someone else's square footage. I excused myself, stepped into the foyer and touched the brass plate by the door that still read Hale House in Caroline's hand. I have learned how to respond without reacting. The quiet revenge is to stop lending your certainty to people who weaponize it. On the hallway console sat my notebook. I wrote the date in full, the words, Memorial Day, the sentence Ethan had spoken, and the deadline he had set. I wrote Saturday move-in at 2:02 in the afternoon because in my head I could already see the clock they would drive by when they arrived. Then I added one more line, call Darren, then another, call Marcus. The plan would be simple. The plan would be legal. The plan would be silent until it was not. I went back out, passed around plates, and told a story about Caroline buying 5 kinds of mustard for the first barbecue we hosted here, how she claimed guests had distinct mustard personalities. Ethan rolled his eyes. Madison asked if our plates were dishwasher safe. Patricia said, "That table needs a runner." I smiled and made a small note on my phone to order a metal welcome plate with a single sentence engraved on it. Not a threat, a promise, welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. I would explain that plate later. For now, I stacked cups and cleared crumbs and let them think I was stepping back. The truth is, I was stepping aside long enough to let the trap of their own arrogance close by itself. Looking back now, the first breadcrumb was not a sentence or a slammed door. It was a small, stupid charge on my credit card for a faux marble bar cart with tiny gold wheels. It arrived one spring afternoon in a box big enough to hide behind, and Ethan laughed that it would elevate the space when they hosted friends. I told myself it was a mix-up and paid it because fathers confuse patience with progress. That is how patterns are born, not with a bang, but with a series of silent approvals that teach everyone exactly how to treat you. Memorial Day was only the loudest chapter in a book I had been helping them write for years. The calls for help always came wrapped in inevitability, a rent spike no one could have predicted, a lease dispute that required a quick deposit I could place by phone, a temporary shortfall on the sport utility vehicle they just had to secure before the promotional rate expired. Each time I told myself I would not be the bridge, and each time I was. I can list the amounts the way a doctor lists scars, a down payment that felt like a favor. A deposit I fronted while swearing I would be repaid, a handful of furniture receipts that were somehow urgent because clients were coming by and first impressions decide careers. By Memorial Day, the provable total sat at $43,000. I'm not telling you this to ask for sympathy. I'm telling you because money is not neutral in families. It speaks, and when you do not make it speak for you, it is used to narrate your weakness. Before Caroline died, she used to joke that I saw the world like a contractor's punch list. Every problem had a sequence, every sequence had a remedy. After she was gone, that instinct turned into a second spine. It held me up through quiet mornings and long evenings when the house felt too big and the dock sounded like an empty boat knocking. So when Ethan and Madison brought their certainty onto my porch on Memorial Day, I did what that second spine had trained me to do. I examined the pattern, and I named it. They had learned that my love looked like an open door and a quiet check. They had learned that I prized peace more than pride, and they had learned, crucially, that I hated scenes. To them, that meant I would surrender to avoid making one. It did not help that Madison learned quickly how to dress condescension as care. "Let us modernize your life," she would say, like I was a dusty exhibit in a small museum. She loved telling me that younger clients adored the aesthetic of fresh starts, and then she would look around my living room and offer a sympathetic smile that meant the opposite of sympathy. Her parents, Gerald and Patricia Monroe, came with the set. Patricia wielded taste like a weapon. Gerald played the genial diplomat who agreed with whatever the strongest person in the room had already decided. Their family theory was simple: the future belongs to those who take it, and older men should be grateful to be curated. But here's where the story bends, and I need you to hear this because it explains everything that happened next. Months before Memorial Day, a neighbor named Darren Miles watched me replace a security light by myself and offered a hand. Darren runs a quiet little business installing smart home systems around the lake. After a petty theft from my boat shed 2 summers ago, he helped me add cameras and an independent battery pack that kept a few essentials running when the grid hiccuped during monsoon storms. He never sold me anything flashy. He sold me reliability. He is the kind of man who tests a sensor 3 times, shrugs, and tests it a 4th time because gut beats ego. Darren has a simple rule I adopted without fuss. Important things do not ride on public Wi-Fi. The other anchor I found was a voice on a calm line downtown, Marcus Lee, an attorney who never sounds like a television attorney. Marcus does not threaten, he explains. When I first called him in late spring to ask general questions about future planning for the house, he did not immediately start outlining a battle. He said, "Document everything. Dates, exact phrases, any deadlines they try to set for you. If you ever choose to act, that paper trail is your friend." He reminded me how Arizona treats gifts and title, how charitable conveyances are recorded, and how county recorder desks do not stamp anything on Sundays. If you sign on a Sunday, he said, we record first thing Monday morning. The moment the recorder indexes it, anyone who claims confusion is actually complaining about chronology. That sentence lodged in my head like a keystone. So I began to write. I wrote down Memorial Day. I wrote down the words Ethan used and the time he picked for Saturday. I took screenshots when Madison texted me a mood board for our primary suite and a spreadsheet of what she expected bought by the weekend. And because clarity matters here is a point that keeps the timeline clean, any video tour of the master suite they later waved around did not come from a break-in. It came from a walkthrough. I allowed earlier that spring when Madison pitched, helping me declutter to free up the lake view. At the time, I believed it was kindness. Later, I would understand it was reconnaissance. I'm telling you that now so no one wonders how a camera panned my walls. I had opened that door, and I would not be opening any more. Meanwhile, the homeowners association around Clearview Lake kept sending their quarterly bulletins about dock lights, guest limits, and occupancy rules that bored me right up until they did not. The same rules that annoyed me were about to become guardrails. A household here is not something you declare by pointing at a porch. It is something you establish by compliance. That will matter later. I will tell that part when we get to Saturday. For now, know this. I was done being the predictable old man who ate humiliation to avoid conflict. Quiet revenge is not about hurting anyone. It is about closing all the doors you used to hold open for the people who walked through you. I had my neighbor Darren, who understood systems. I had my attorney Marcus, who understood timing. And I had the last promise I ever made to Caroline, which I could feel whenever the late light turned the water that stained glass blue she loved. Memorial Day had started with a smirk. It would end with a plan. The countdown did not sound like a drum. It sounded like ordinary life clinking along. Tuesday morning after Memorial Day, I brewed coffee, opened a yellow folder, and began to turn chaos into a list. I wrote down every transfer and favor I could prove, the down payment I had floated when their rent spiked, the short-term apartment deposit I had placed by phone during a lease dispute, the sprawling receipts from the furniture rush that Madison called urgent for client optics, and the sport utility vehicle shortfall I had covered when a promotional rate dangled like bait. By the time the ink dried, the provable total read $43,000. That number mattered because it turned the story away from histrionics and toward math. I'm not a martyr. I'm a man who keeps invoices. There is a difference. At 9, I called Marcus Lee. He listened without interrupting, then gave me a chain of simple instructions in that weather-calm voice of his. Document every message. Do not argue in writing. If they set a deadline, confirm it back to them in neutral language so the clock belongs to them. Keep your tone as if a judge is reading over your shoulder. He reminded me of Arizona's quiet machinery gifts are not community property. A charitable conveyance recorded by the county etches deeper than family opinion. County recorders do not stamp deeds on Sundays, so if I signed on Sunday, we would record first thing Monday morning and let chronology do the talking. You do not need a fight, he said. You need a sequence. Then he added the only flourish I've ever heard from him. When the recorder indexes your deed, confusion becomes complaint. I wrote that down word for word. At 10, Ethan texted. He used bullet points as if I were his intern. Saturday move-in, truck after lunch, a joking nod to a precise time, 2:02 in the afternoon, easier to remember. He followed with a line that pretended to be generous. We will leave your favorite chair. 5 minutes later, Madison sent a mood board for our primary suite, a spreadsheet of items we need purchased by the weekend, and a note about a handyman coming by to measure. To keep the timeline clean and the law on my side, I replied in plain language I would not authorize any alterations. I would not be making purchases, and any measurement should be limited to exterior access points only at a time I approved. Then I took screenshots of everything and printed hard copies. Screens fade, paper works. At noon, I walked the perimeter of the villa with the Homeowners Association rules in one hand and a pencil in the other. The lake community, which I had teased for caring about docklight wattage, turned out to be a small fortress of definitions. Occupancy here is not a feeling, it is a status. Guests are time-limited. Unapproved construction triggers fines. Unauthorized use of amenities is grounds for a formal letter. I had never wanted to weaponize any of that, and I still did not. But I wrote the relevant clauses on a single sheet because truth spoken without proof sounds like pleading. Truth with citation sounds like a door closing softly. Mid-afternoon, I called Darren Miles. "Load me on your calendar," I said. "No rush orders, no theatrics. I want a closed network battery redundancy and one more layer of sensory surprises calibrated for safety. Nothing that can hurt anyone, nothing that violates any code." Darren asked 2 questions. I loved him for, "What is your goal and what is your timeline?" I told him my goal was deterrence, not harm, and my timeline was 5 quiet days. He blew out a breath and said, "We will do the first pass, Wednesday night, finish Thursday, test Friday. I will bring the projector and the directional audio array. We will keep everything on an isolated loop off your public Wi-Fi, the way we did for your boat shed cameras. And we will set delays, not locks, so you are never accused of trapping anyone." He spoke my language sequence compliance redundancy. Before dinner, I ordered a Ring doorbell, configured to mirror footage to a local drive that lives in a small safe behind my tool bench. I'm sure the cloud works fine for most people. I am not most people. I also placed an order with a small metal shop in town, a slim steel plate etched with a sentence. "Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk." It was not a threat. It was an expectation setter. If you walk past a sign and pretend you did not see it, the problem is not the font. That night, as the lake took on Caroline's stained glass blue, I made the call I had been postponing for months, because grief makes simple acts feel like betrayals. I called the Veterans Rest Initiative. I had met their director at a community breakfast and filed the brochure under Someday. I told her I wanted to discuss a charitable conveyance with a clause reserving lifetime access and occupancy for me. She did not sound surprised. She asked me to bring my identification and meet her Sunday morning at a diner with red vinyl booths on Central Avenue. "We can sign on Sunday," she said, "and have your attorney record first thing Monday." My second spine straightened. The plan would not be vindictive. It would be generous in a direction that did not include people who treated me like a placeholder. I slept and woke with the sequence written on a card beside my bed. Wednesday and Thursday, Darren's work. Friday, final checks and a quiet grocery run. Saturday, let the people who wanted a takeover meet a house that does not like being told who it belongs to. Sunday morning sign, Monday morning record, Monday late morning sit across from them in a downtown office that smells like lemon polish and deliver the sentence that closes chapters. Tuesday afternoon, let a photograph travel. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and I promised to keep the timeline honest. At sunrise on Wednesday, I unlocked a door Ethan did not know existed. Not the front door, a legal door. The sound it made was nothing, and that is how you know a plan is working. At sunrise on Wednesday, the lake was the color of patience. Darren pulled up with a modest toolbox and a coil of cable, not the kind of drama anyone could accuse of preparing an ambush. We shook hands the way men do when they are agreeing to build something invisible. "Deterrence, not damage," I said, repeating our rule. "Delays, not traps. Safety first within residential code." He nodded once. "In an isolated loop like the boat shed," he added. "Important things do not ride on public Wi-Fi. That is Darren's mantra, and now it is mine." We started in the garage because plans that hold begin behind closed doors. He mounted a small local hub high on the inner wall off the eyeline, then connected an independent battery unit the size of a shoebox that could carry the essentials without drawing attention if the power flickered. No blinking lights, no theatrical noises, only the quiet certainty of redundancy. We ran a thin cable through the attic to a compact projector bracket above the hallway, small as a book. The projector would not display a monster or a message, just a man's silhouette, life-sized and ordinary, the kind of shape that makes you pause, because your brain cannot tell if you are alone. By mid-morning, we calibrated motion sensors in ways that would irritate no one walking properly into a home, but would wake up if a crowd barged ahead, as if the place owed them speed. We set the entry lock to greet arrivals with a soft chime and then a deliberate delay of 30 seconds before fully disengaging, a pause, legal and safe, the sort of pause that makes even the confident become aware of their heartbeat. 30 seconds is not a prison. It is a mirror. In the kitchen, Darren adjusted the faucet aerators so a thin mist could surprise without soaking. In the guest room, we placed a speaker hidden behind a linen chair. Through it, we could send a single whisper, not loud enough to frighten a child, not fierce enough to be called a shout, but intimate enough to be heard by the person standing nearest while the others blinked and said, "What did you say?" Directional audio is less about volume than about aim, and what it aims at is certainty. "Test me," Darren said, wiping his hands on a cloth like a surgeon stepping back from a table. I walked out onto the porch and came back in with the impatience Ethan wears like a watch. The chime sounded. The 30-second delay held. A cautious flicker of strobe touched the ceiling and then was gone before anyone could point and call it a hazard. A breath of air moved from the floor vent to brush a shin. The hallway shadow crossed as if a neighbor had stepped in to ask a question. The guest room speaker exhaled a sentence that could have been memory. "You should not be here." We stood still together, Darren and I, and listened to the house be itself. Then he cut the system and we made notes. Nothing dangerous, nothing reckless, nothing that could even be called aggressive. A nudge, not a shove. A boundary with manners. In the afternoon, the metal shop called. The slim plate I ordered was etched and ready. I drove into town, signed for it, and held it in my hands outside the shop. It was thinner than I had imagined, with letters that would read, even in low light, "Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. It is not a dare. It is a disclaimer, the kind you see before you step onto a boat or into a ski lift, a simple reminder that the world does not bend for your entitlement." I mounted it at eye level on the inside of the front gate where anyone arriving with boxes or bravado would have to look right at it to unlatch the gate. I could already hear Patricia's laugh. That is fine. Ring would hear it too, because the doorbell I ordered on Tuesday had arrived and now mirrored footage to a small local drive in a fireproof safe behind my tool bench. Cloud storage might be enough for other people. I prefer the certainty of a key in my own hand. Thursday, we refined instead of adding. Darren replaced 2 aging motion sensors with newer, calmer versions that would not false alarm at moths. He angled the projector so the silhouette would fall only into the hallway and not into the living room, which could have startled a guest. We set the audio to the lowest possible level that still sounded like a person standing near you, and then lowered it another notch. I walked the HOA and Lake Association rules one more time, not to weaponize them, but to remember the language. This neighborhood cares about clarity. Guests are welcome on defined terms. Occupancy is not something you declare by smirking on a porch. It is established by compliance. I printed the 2 clauses that mattered and placed the paper into a folder labeled Saturday, as if labeling the day could blunt its edge. In between adjustments, memory threaded itself through the work. The picture window threw that stained glass blue across the floor, and I could see Caroline at the long table arranging forks as if setting a table could change a year. I promised her once without drama that I would guard the life we built without becoming a guard dog. That distinction had guided every choice this week. Nothing here would harm. Everything would inform. If the house felt eerie when a crowd who had declared ownership came at it with momentum and boxes, that eeriness would be the sound of their certainty cracking in the face of a boundary. When Friday arrived, we rehearsed the sequence like a modest stage crew. Door chime, 30-second delay, a breath of air, a light brush of strobe, the shadow crossing the hallway, the single whisper. Darren timed me on the porch to make sure an ordinary, respectful entry would sail through with nothing but the chime and the cheerful click of the latch. It did. We both smiled. "They will trip only what they earn," he said. I placed the slim steel plate at the gate one last time to make sure a person carrying a box would be forced to read it. Then I checked the ring mirroring to the drive, opened the safe, and watched the indicator blink. 1 copy in the safe, 1 copy on a backup drive in my desk. Screens fade, paper works, and when it comes to video, 2 copies spread the truth like light. Before Darren left, he said, "You sure about Saturday?" I nodded. Saturday at 2. 2 in the afternoon, I answered, giving him the time. Ethan had smirked into a message. The clock is theirs. The house is mine. He chuckled, then grew serious. You got your papers too. I tapped the folder that held the draft deed for the Veterans Rest Initiative and the notes from Marcus Lee. Sunday morning would be signatures at the diner with red booths. Monday morning, the county would record. Monday late morning would be the polite conversation downtown. Tuesday afternoon, the photograph would travel. But I'm saving those hours for their own telling. For now, all you need to know is that by Friday sunset, the lake looked the way it does when a storm has decided to miss you. The air tasted clear. The house felt alert but not angry. And I stood on my porch, touched the brass plate that still reads Hale House in Caroline's hand, and said out loud the only line that mattered: I will not raise my voice. I will raise my boundaries. By Friday morning, the house felt tuned like a good instrument, no bravado, just a readiness that made me breathe easier. I brewed coffee and opened the yellow folder again, not because anything had changed, but because rituals keep fear from deciding the day. On top sat a fresh printout of the Homeowners Association and Lake Association clauses about occupancy and unapproved alterations. I had highlighted the 2 lines that mattered. Guests are welcome under time limits. Occupancy requires compliance, not declarations. I kept hearing Marcus Lee's sentence about chronology in my head: when the recorder indexes your deed, confusion becomes complaint. That recording would not happen until Monday morning because county desks do not stamp deeds on Sundays, and I would not pretend otherwise. Precision was part of the plan. It kept me honest, and it would keep everyone else honest too. Just before noon, my phone chimed twice the way it does when Madison wants to sound professional. She sent a typed occupancy agreement as a portable document with a chipper note. If you can sign by close of business, Friday, we will make Saturday seamless. The pages were a batch of soft language and hard demands: storage rights, decision authority over updates, and a breezy clause about my comfort suite at their apartment in the city. I didn't argue in writing. I never do. I replied with one sentence that Marcus had approved months earlier. For situations exactly like this, I will review any proposed documents with counsel. Please do not schedule or initiate work at the villa. Then I printed the exchange, clipped it to my timeline, and called Marcus's office to leave a courtesy message for the file. Screens fade, paper works. That is not paranoia. That is adulthood. In the afternoon, I walked the rooms the way a ship's captain checks bulkheads. The projector cradle above the hallway sat silent, almost shy. The motion sensors held their posts without blinking, tuned to ignore moths and small gestures, but to notice momentum. The kitchen faucets whispered their thin mist when I signaled, then stood down. The guest room speaker sent one brief line at the lowest level: you should not be here. Even I had to lean in to catch it. Nothing dangerous, nothing theatrical, nothing that could be called a trap. Delays, not locks. Deterrence, not damage. Residential code, not improvisation. If you are listening to this and looking for some gleeful booby trap, you will be disappointed. Quiet revenge is a boundary with manners. Between checks, I opened the lower cabinet where Caroline used to hide extra tea candles and found the small white box she had labeled with a smiley face and the word keep. Inside was the lake stone she had made me pocket on our first walk here, gray and smooth as a promise. This one is yours, she said. Then, and when the day comes that you forget why we chose this place, hold it until you remember. I sat on the floor next to the picture window and did exactly that. The late light turned the water to stained glass. That blue, she always claimed, felt like forgiveness. I thought about how many times I had forgiven absence, forgiven entitlement, forgiven the shrug when repayment never arrived. This time, forgiveness would not look like surrender. It would look like a deed carried by a courier to the county on Monday morning. Around 3, Darren texted a checklist hub secured high in the garage, independent battery quietly topped up, projector angle, adjusted motion sensors replaced where needed, entry lock delay confirmed at 30 seconds, and Ring doorbell mirroring to the local drive behind my tool bench. He added one last line that mattered more than any gadget. All devices comply with safety standards. Nothing can harm anyone. I sent back a thank you and a photo of the small safe, opened the little drive winking like a distant buoy, and another portable drive labeled with painter's tape in my handwriting. 2 copies, 2 truths. I imagined Patricia's laugh when she saw the slim steel plate at the gate tomorrow and felt the irritation roll off me like rain. Laugh and then read. The sentence is short and the law smiles on notice. At 4, Ethan's name lit my screen with a message I could have written for him. Truck after lunch tomorrow. We will be there at 2:02 in the afternoon. Do not make this hard. He added a winking face, the punctuation of someone who thinks charm is a solvent. I typed and deleted several replies before settling on the only one that served the plan. Received. My hands were steady. When people live on your predictability long enough, they confuse your quiet for weakness. They forget that quiet can be a locked door, not a bowed head. As sunset slipped along the lake, I put on Caroline's old flannel shirt and took the long table down to bare wood. The lemon oil lives under the sink, and the smell is part of how the house tells me it still knows me. I wiped along the grain and felt the old nicks from summers when friends laughed too loud and forks clattered. I thought about the guest room Darren had tuned so carefully. I pictured Madison narrating a future she had not earned into her phone, telling clients about a primary suite that would be hers by the weekend. When people narrate a thing long enough, they start believing they wrote it. That is the danger of rehearsals without rights. I blew out a breath and put the oil away. Before bed, I made one last loop. Gate plate polished and fixed at eye level, ring tested with a walk to the mailbox. The mirror file appeared in the safe exactly as planned. Front lock chime cheerful, then the 30-second pause. That pause is legal and deliberate. It mines time, not bodies. Kitchen mist responsive but brief. Hallway shadow smooth, not jumpy. Guest room, whisper a feather, not a shove. I set the thermostat, turned off the lamps, and wrote a single line in my notebook under the date the house is ready to tell the truth politely. Tomorrow, a truck will rumble up the drive tires, crunching gravel, a trunk full of monogrammed towels and big ideas. They will meet a house that does not raise its voice. They will meet a boundary. And somewhere between the chime and the pause, between a shadow and a whisper, arrogance will stumble over notice. I will let the clock they set announce itself. I will not be cruel. I will be clear. By Friday evening, the mask began to slip, not with a confession, but with confidence so loud it forgot to be careful. A mutual acquaintance from Madison's design circle forwarded me a screen capture I was not meant to see. It was a group chat dressed up as empowerment. By Saturday afternoon, we will be in. He will not make a scene. I'm done with beige. The words glowed with the kind of certainty people practice in mirrors. A minute later, another message popped up on my own phone, this time from Ethan, trimmed and tidy like a memo. Reminder truck arrives after lunch. We come at 2:02 in the afternoon. Please have pathways cleared. No greeting, no question marks. Just scheduling as if I were his superintendent and the villa a job site he had already bid and won. I stood at the picture window and watched the water turn that stained glass blue Caroline loved, and reminded myself quietly that certainty is only loud until it meets a boundary. I emailed the captures to Marcus Lee with a single line for the file. He replied with 2 sentences that felt like a level settling true. Good paper. Do not argue in writing. Let their timeline annotate itself. Then, almost like an aside, he added the detail that keeps a plan honest. Remember, the county recorder will index the deed Monday morning, not Sunday. If anyone demands proof before then, the answer is simple. The recorder keeps business hours. Precision is a kindness. It saves you from overclaiming and gives your opponent a clean path to trip over their own confidence. Late that night, Darren texted his final checklist from the day's calibrations. The local hub sat high in the garage, well above an easy glance. The independent battery was topped quietly. If the grid hiccuped, the essentials would not blink. The projector's angle had been tuned so the silhouette would fall only into the hallway, never where a guest might be. Motion sensors were the calmer kind, trained to ignore moths and small gestures, but pay attention to momentum. The entry lock chimed, then paused for 30 seconds, a deliberate delay that mines time, not bodies. The kitchen teases a cool mist and quits. The guest room speaker exhales one soft sentence, "You should not be here." The Ring doorbell mirrored to a small local drive living in the safe behind my tool bench, with a second copy to a portable drive labeled in my handwriting. All devices meet residential safety standards, Darren wrote. Deterrence only. That line mattered more than any gadget. Revenge is not a stunt. Done right, it is a policy. Around midnight, I took one last walk through the rooms, not to admire the tricks, but to memorize the house at rest. The pine floors held their quiet gloss. The long table wore the thin sheen of lemon oil. The brass plate by the door still read Hale House in Carolyn's hand, and I remembered the day she penciled the letters, first squinting and laughing when I tried to help. "You will make it crooked with your good intentions," she teased, and then she made it straight. The memory steadied me. I was not building a haunted house. I was building a polite line that said no. Saturday morning arrived without fanfare. The lake air smelled like clean slate. I made coffee and skimmed the Lake Association's holiday weekend bulletin that had auto-arrived at dawn, the kind of message I used to delete without reading. It reminded residents that guest limits and occupancy rules would be lightly monitored through the long weekend, and that unapproved alterations would draw fines. Those words used to feel petty. Now they read like a chorus line behind a soloist. Not my weapon, not my argument, just context in a place that likes rules to be written down where everyone can see them. I tucked the bulletin into my folder. Screens fade, paper works. At 9, my phone rang. Patricia's voice can carry silk over steel. "Richard, let us try to keep today elegant. We know change is hard. Madison has a vision and Ethan is stepping up in a way that will be so good for you. We will keep one of your chairs as an heirloom." The way she said heirloom sliced the air. I let a beat pass, then answered with a sentence so even it sounded like weather. "Thank you for the call, Patricia. I will be a good host within the rules of the lake community." She made a small sound that was halfway between a laugh and a scoff. "Do not be dramatic," she said and hung up. "That is what people call you when you refuse to perform the role they wrote for you." I tidied the front walk and polished the slim steel plate on the inside of the gate so the words would not hide behind dust. "Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. It is not a dare. It is a disclosure. If you walk past a clear sentence and keep going, you are telling the world who you are." I checked the ring with a simple trip to the mailbox and watched the mirrored file land in the safe. The indicator blinked like a small heartbeat. I closed the safe and locked it. 1 copy is proof. 2 copies are peace. Back inside, I folded Thoreau's Straightened Spines of books and put Caroline's Lakestone in my pocket. Small rituals stitch courage into a day. At noon, I ate a sandwich standing up the way I used to on job sites when framing crews were late and the clouds looked like rain. At 1, I turned off the living room lamp and let natural light do what it does best, tell the truth without commentary. At 1:45, I stood at the picture window and let my mind go still. I did not run through speeches or rehearse outrage. I let the house do the talking it had been tuned to do. 2:02 in the afternoon was not my choice. It was theirs. That is an important distinction. When people set their own clock, you do not have to announce anything. You simply let time keep its promise. At 1:58, a text from Ethan arrived, all edge disguised as shrug. "On our way. Please do not embarrass yourself." I put the phone face down and breathed the way my doctor taught me after Caroline died, in for a count, hold, exhale slow. At 2 o'clock, the lake held its breath. At 2:01, a gull cut across the water like a thought. And at 2:02 in the afternoon, tires began to crunch the gravel at the start of my drive. But that is the next chapter, and I will tell it clean. For now, know this: the loudest thing in my house was the quiet. The second loudest was a sentence etched in steel. Everything else was about to learn how boundaries speak. At 2:02 in the afternoon, the lake held that bright hush it gets when heat presses everything flat, and the first sound that broke it was tires rolling slow over gravel. The sport utility vehicle came up my drive like a verdict. I stood just inside the foyer, where the air smelled faintly of lemon oil and cool pine, water glass in my hand, back straight, voice steady because I was not going to need it. The Ring doorbell chimed its friendly note and mirrored the frame to the small drive in my safe. Proof, not theater. Through the picture window, I watched Ethan climb out, first shoulders set in that swagger he learned from men who mistake volume for authority. Madison followed, sunglasses high on her headlips, already in narration mode. Behind them, Patricia and Gerald Monroe approached with careful smiles, the kind that come preloaded with entitlement. They reached the gate and met the sentence I had polished that morning. "Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk." Patricia tilted her head, read it aloud like she was correcting a student, and laughed. "Oh, Richard." Then, because a small thing undone is a lever she cannot resist, she reached up, tugged the slim steel plate off its hooks, and held it like a trophy. The ring caught all of it, the hand, the smirk. The moment a clear notice became an inconvenience. That is the problem with people who think rules are decor. They think the world is a showroom. Ethan swung the gate wide and led them to the front door, arms full of monogrammed towels and optimism. The lock greeted them with the soft chime I chose precisely because it sounds like hospitality. Then it did exactly what it was designed to do. It waited. 30 seconds is not a trap. 30 seconds is a mirror. The pause asked a question their momentum had not allowed time to consider. Why are you here? Ethan juggled the towels and knocked with his knuckles like a landlord. Testing paint. Madison rummaged for a camera and began to talk about first steps into our lake home. Patricia looked back at the driveway as if help should be arriving. Gerald cleared his throat, the universal sound of a man who wants someone else to fix the tone. The latch clicked open at second 31, still cheerful. They pushed inside and the house exhaled the way a well-tuned instrument does when played the way it prefers. A soft strobe kissed the ceiling once and quit, not enough to startle a child, just enough to make a crowd look up as if the room itself had something to say. A breath rose from the floor vent and cooled their ankles, more suggestion than shove. Down the hallway, a life-size silhouette crossed the far wall and vanished, ordinary as a neighbor peeking in to ask about a missing wrench. In the guest room, a hidden speaker exhaled one line at the lowest setting: "You should not be here." Directional audio is not about scare, it is about aim. Madison stiffened and looked at Gerald. "What did you say?" He blinked. He had said nothing. The whisper had found a single ear. "Do not be ridiculous," Patricia announced loud enough to steady herself. She walked toward the hallway. The kitchen faucet offered a cool mist that ended before it could be called anything but suggestion. "Richard, enough games." Ethan called, but the confident lift was gone. He took 2 quick strides and tripped another polite brush of light. He paused, and doubt cut a notch into his certainty. "I didn't raise my voice. I let the house speak in manners. Delay, not lock. Deterrence, not damage. Every device within residential code calibrated by a man who tests a 4th time because gut beats ego. If you came for a trap, you will be disappointed. Quiet revenge is a line so clear that people trip over it themselves." Madison tried to recast the scene for her lens. The lens captured nothing but clean walls and honest light. "We are moving in," Ethan announced, but the room refused to echo him. Patricia turned toward the door and in turning met the 30-second pause again. She tugged the knob and found it waiting. "This is outrageous," she snapped, which is what entitlement says when tone fails as currency. Gerald touched her elbow and mouthed a word I could read from across the foyer: "Go." They did not sprint. Pride never does. They backed through the entry with dignity arranged on their faces like fragile china. On the porch, Patricia's bravado thinned. With a small huff, she set the slim steel plate on the top step instead of taking it with her. The ring watched that too, hand-lowering metal landing proof, returning to the place where notice belongs. I opened the door, then not to perform, but to host within rules. "Guests are welcome under time limits," I said, using the language the Lake HOA favors. "Unapproved alterations draw fines. Please do not schedule or initiate work. If you have documents, send them to council." Ethan attempted one more stride. The chime answered. He stopped. They left with towels still folded in a silence that follows a joke that did not land. When the driveway swallowed their vehicle, I stepped out, picked up the plate, and carried it inside with my folder. "Notice retained," I wrote in my notebook. Sunday morning arrived with a sky so clear it felt like permission. Before I drove into Phoenix, I placed the slim steel plate retrieved from the top step yesterday and recorded by the ring on my foyer table with the HOA folder and my yellow notebook, proof where it belongs. Then I headed to the diner on Central Avenue with the red vinyl booths and the coffee that tastes like the 90s. The director of Veterans Rest Initiative was already there, sleeves rolled, a neat stack of documents beside her. Marcus Lee met us with a notary he trusts. We did not stage anything. We did not make speeches. We signed a charitable conveyance that moves the villa to Veterans Rest Initiative with one essential clause written in unambiguous words: I retain lifetime access and occupancy. That clause was not a flourish. It was the hinge the door swings on. When the pens clicked closed, Marcus repeated the part that keeps the timeline honest. "The county recorder will not index deeds on Sunday," he said. "First thing Monday morning, I will file and secure the recording number. Chronology will do the talking. Precision is not drama. It is restraint with a spine." We sealed the originals into a flat envelope from Marcus's satchel and ate eggs like ordinary people. No toasts, no victory photos. The director showed me a draft of a social post slotted for Tuesday afternoon, one photo of someone looking over water. A line about a gift that will help veterans heal and a thank you to me by name. Only after the recording is live, she added. Plans rot when sequence gets lazy. Back home, I set 3 things in motion not to gloat but to make the next 48 hours clean. First, Marcus finalized 2 letters on behalf of the charity, a no trespass notice issued by Veterans Rest Initiative as owner, expressly acknowledging my lifetime occupancy rights, and a cease harassment letter instructing Ethan Madison and the Monroes to stop scheduling or initiating any work at the villa and to direct all communication through counsel. Both would go out Monday morning after the deed recorded, each bearing the fresh recording number. Second, I clipped the 2 clauses from the Lake HOA rules, guest limits, and fines for unapproved alterations, so a line stood between opinion and policy. Third, I wrote an index card for my pocket like a map: Monday at 8 in the morning, recorder; Monday at 11, conference room; Tuesday at 2, social post. Evening eased over the lake. I walked the dock with Caroline's flannel on my shoulders and the small stone she made me pocket years ago warm in my palm. I thought about what it means to give something away in order to keep it in the shape it deserves. I thought about the veterans who would sit on this dock and breathe deep after months of breathing shallow. After sundown, I opened the safe and checked the mirrored ring files like a captain checks a compass. The clip that showed Patricia taking the plate and the clip that showed her setting it back down sat in clean high definition. Context, not cruelty. I locked the safe, set the plate beside my folder, and turned the house to night chime set delay, steady mist off projector, a sleep sensors calm, signed Sunday, record Monday, speak Monday, post Tuesday, the 4-beat rhythm of a plan that does not need a raised voice. I slept. Monday morning broke like a slate snapped clean. At 8 sharp, Marcus texted a single sentence that carried more weight than a dozen arguments. Recorder has indexed, here is the number. He followed with a scan of the stamped deed, the county's digital ink, crisp at the top. That number did not shout. It did not insult. It simply ended a debate before it could begin. 10 minutes later, he filed the no trespass notice and the cease harassment letter on Veterans Rest Initiative, letterhead, each bearing the recording number, and sent courtesy copies by email and certified mail to Ethan Madison and the Monroes. A boundary is not just a feeling. It is a document with a date and a place it lives where other adults can find it. At 11, we gathered in a downtown Phoenix conference room that smelled faintly of lemon polish and ambition. The receptionist had the kindness to offer water without comment. Ethan arrived first, jaw set, then Madison with a folder whose tabs looked like victory. Patricia and Gerald came last, one step behind their own expectations. Marcus greeted them as if we were discussing a roofline and not a rupture. He is good at that. Thank you for coming, he said, and slid a thin stack of papers onto the table like a well-timed card. Before we begin, I want to note for the record that as of 8 this morning, the Maricopa County Recorder has indexed an irrevocable charitable conveyance of Clearview Lake Villa to Veterans Rest Initiative with Mr. Hale, retaining lifetime access and occupancy. Here is the recording number. Madison blinked like a camera thrown out of focus. Ethan leaned forward. No, he said, as if negation were a tool. You cannot just donate our house. Marcus did not even have to look at me. He kept his gaze on Ethan and spoke in the tone of a man reading street signs. It has never been your house. Title was and is in Mr. Hale's name, and now title is with the charity. Arizona law treats gifts as separate property, and charitable conveyances recorded with the county supersede family opinion. Additionally, Veterans Rest Initiative has issued no trespass and cease harassment notices served this morning, acknowledging Mr. Hale's lifetime access. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. But there is no pending decision in this room. Patricia gathered herself into a posture that has worked on lesser rooms. This is elder abuse in reverse, she announced. He is being manipulated. Marcus nodded once, like a teacher awarding a child for using a new word, then set it aside. What we have are documents, he said. If you believe you have a claim, you are free to file. We will respond in writing. Gerald tried a different door. Perhaps we could discuss keys and transitional timing, he offered, diplomat to the end. We will not be discussing keys, Marcus said, and turned to me with the small permission I had been waiting for all week. He did not have to say anything. I looked at Ethan. My son, who once held the far end of a 2x4, while I set a level, who learned from me that a straight line beats a loud speech and kept my voice measured. We are done discussing my home, I said. I did not add a flourish. The recorder number was flourish enough. There was more silence than voices after that. They asked if the charity would consider leasing the house back short term. The charity would not. They asked if I would release my occupancy. I would not. They tried to cast the weekend as a misunderstanding. The ring would not. Madison said something about optics and narratives and how this would look. Marcus, with that calm that confuses people who want to fight, said, "The story is in the index." He closed the folder, stood, and thanked them for their time with the same warmth he had used when he said hello. We left them there with their dignities stacked in a fragile pile. Outside, I exhaled the kind of breath you do not know you have been holding until it fogs the air. The building's glass doors let in a clean slice of desert light. "Go home," Marcus said, "and do not answer anything that is not from counsel." His job was over for the day. Mine too. Chronology had done the talking, and it had a better voice than anger. Driving back to the lake, I passed a billboard for a furniture store Madison once dragged me to when she insisted my living room needed to start over. The words on it read, "New beginnings, no compromises." I smiled at the luck of copywriters. New beginnings can be quiet. They can be a single line. We are done discussing my home. They can be a number at the top of a page. They can be the knowledge that a house built for love will now hold strangers until their hearts settle. Back at the villa, I put the kettle on, watched the ring indicator wink in the safe, and wrote one line in my notebook under the date, recorded served and spoken without shouting. Tuesday moved differently, like a page turning itself. At 2 in the afternoon, Veterans Rest Initiative posted one photo in a paragraph. No melodrama, no gloating, just a shot of a weathered man's back looking over a lake and words about a donated home that would host small weekend retreats for veterans learning to breathe again. They thanked me by name. When a local reporter reached out for comment, I did not freelance a quote. I called Marcus first. He approved a single line and asked that it be relayed through the charity's communications lead. The charity sent it on my behalf, attributed to me exactly as cleared. This house has always been a place to heal. I'm grateful it will remain so. The story did not flip by force. It rotated toward the facts already living in the index. Quiet consequences landed like dew. A design client of Madison's sent a short cancellation, no reason supplied. A vendor she had courted declined to extend a line of credit after an employee forwarded the article with the charity's post. Ethan's manager, who had tolerated too many late arrivals and midday emergencies, scheduled a careful meeting about professionalism. None of this was spectacle. That is the point. When you try to build a future on someone else's title, the ground does not hold. The Lake HOA circulated a midweek bulletin, bland as ever, reminding residents that unapproved alterations draw fines, that unauthorized occupancy would be enforced lightly but consistently, and that holiday weekends were not exceptions. It was not about me or about them. It was about a neighborhood that prefers adulthood on paper. I printed the bulletin and slid it into my folder beside the recorder's number and Marcus's letters. Messages from Ethan pinged in weather-like waves. "We should talk. Mom is upset. You make everything harder than it needs to be." I didn't mean Saturday to go that way. Then the sentence that told the truth. "You embarrassed us." I typed and deleted before I answered, then sent the one line I had already practiced with my attorney. "I'm enforcing a boundary." He called. I let it ring. He called again. I let it die. Quiet revenge is not performance. It is the refusal to audition for roles you never wanted. By evening, a neighbor texted me a single sentence and a still from his own door camera showing a familiar vehicle idling where visitors are not supposed to idle. "For your file," he wrote. I didn't need it. The ring had already kept what mattered. But it felt like the neighborhood itself had nodded. That is what compliance buys you, not applause, only the steady gravity of order. I ate simply at the long table Caroline loved and put the folder away. The house felt lighter, not because I had won something, but because I had put down a weight I should not have carried. Outside, the water turned that stained glass blue, and I heard her in the window doors. Do not forget which way they open. You just stop letting people slam them. The next days were not fireworks. They were gravity. Missed calls stacked into double digits, then tapered into that peculiar quiet that happens when people run out of scripts. Certified envelopes went out from Veterans Rest Initiative, no trespass, and cease harassment letters, each bearing the recorder's number at the top like a clock. Marcus forwarded the delivery confirmations without commentary. The charity did not raise its voice. It did not need to. The county had already spoken. Madison tried a soft counter-narrative online, nothing defamatory, just vague lines about navigating complicated elder transitions. The comments misbehaved. Too many people had seen the article. A mutual acquaintance noticed the Ring camera in a frame I had shared privately with counsel and asked why a sign that said, "Enter at your own risk," had been removed. She did not answer. A client sent her a direct message that began, "Given the recent story," and ended with a pause. Her tone sharpened in my inbox. "You will regret making this public," she wrote. I replied once precisely, "The recorder's index is public. All communication should go through counsel." Then I stopped replying. Boundaries do not negotiate. Ethan tried different keys to a door that no longer opened for him. Can we talk without lawyers? Can I swing by to pick up a few items? Could I have a temporary key to make transitions smoother? Each time I answered with the sentence Marcus and I had agreed upon weeks ago, "Please direct requests through counsel." I was not punishing my son. I was refusing to play the accommodating obstacle in a story he and his in-laws had written without me. Love without boundaries is not love. It is fuel. The Lake HOA did what it always does. A notice went out about visitor parking. A violation was issued for a contractor who tried to measure a window without prior authorization. The notice was addressed properly to Veterans Rest Initiative as the titled owner with a courtesy copy to me under my lifetime occupancy clause. It referenced the lot and the property name. I mailed a check the next morning voluntarily to close the loop even though I had not commissioned the attempt. Sometimes you pay a small fee to keep a big narrative straight. There was one message I saved for last, not as a weapon, but as a record. I texted Ethan a still frame from the Ring clip that shows Patricia lifting the slim steel plate from my gate and another still that shows her placing it back on the top step before they left. I added a line a judge would understand. Notice was posted, Ring recorded removal and return. He did not reply for hours. When he did, it was not rage. It was a sentence that sounded like a boy I remember. I didn't think it would go like this. That was the truest thing he had said in weeks. I typed erase, typed again. The answer I sent did not punish. Neither did I wrote. Boundaries are new for me. I'm keeping them. Then I put my phone face down, stepped onto the porch, and watched a heron lift from the reeds like a slow piece of hope. The house behind me was not a fortress. It was a home that could open when invited and remain shut when not. On the workbench, the safe's small light blinked. In my pocket, the index card had softened at the edges from being folded and refolded. Monday recorded, Monday spoken, Tuesday posted, Wednesday and Thursday quiet. Friday I fixed a squeak in the hallway hinge and laughed at the simplicity of repair. Most problems do not need a spectacle. They need a screwdriver and a boundary. Months later, the villa breathes the way it always meant to. Veterans Rest Initiative hosts small weekend retreats that look like ordinary mornings. Done carefully, coffee on the dock. Quiet group walks at first light, a therapist who speaks like a friend. I keep my room at the end of the hall with the view Caroline called her daily chapel. I am not a ghost in my own home. I am a steward. When the retreats are on, I move like a tide present when needed gone, when not a nod on the path, a pot of chili left warming a stack of clean towels laundered as if that were a sacrament. I have learned the names of men and women who carry more silence than I ever had to, and the house carries them back. Doors do not forget which way they open. Ethan and Madison live across town now. We exchange short civil messages on holidays. He tells me about a project that finally fits. I tell him the dock board he helped me replace at 12 has never needed a second repair. We do not reach for the old arguments. We do not perform. Patricia, months removed from her porch performance, sent a stiff note asking if she could have the little metal sign back as a keepsake. I replied with calm truth. The original plate retrieved after she set it on my step and held on the ring has been donated to Veterans Rest. It hangs in their small conference room beside the policy binder, a modest parable about notice and listening. If she wants a memento, I will gladly order a replica. She has not written back. Neighbors sometimes ask whether I regret the noise, by which they mean the brief week when whispers and blue hearts and bulletins braided into a story. I tell them there was less noise than they imagine. The loudest part was the quiet a deed recorded on a Monday morning, a sentence in a conference room, a photograph on a Tuesday afternoon that was not about me, but about a purpose larger than my porch. Quiet revenge is not actually revenge. It is an exit. You step out of the play you were cast in, release the set to a troupe that will use it better, and go sit by the lake to remember lines that sounded like home. On late autumn evenings, when the light breaks low and the water turns that stained glass blue Caroline claimed as her own, I wear her flannel and sand a piece of cedar for the dock rail. The house behind me holds the murmur of cards on a table, the clink of a spoon against a mug, the measured laughter of people who have found their breath again. My phone buzzes. It is Ethan. A photo of a lamp he and Madison finally built themselves. "We built this one," he writes, "and I am quietly proud. We are learning new roles without a crowd telling us how to say the lines." If you are listening and wondering whether kindness can win against arrogance, here is the answer from a quiet house on a hot lake. Kindness with a boundary is a key. Without a boundary, it is only a rug. If family greed ever blindsided you, say the name of your city in the comments, so the map fills with places where people choose chronology over shouting. Subscribe if you want the surprise, though. By now the surprise is that peace can be louder than anger. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my boundaries. I kept my promise to Caroline. And one Monday in a recorder's office, a clerk indexed a number that turned a smirk on a porch into a footnote. The rest is a man finishing his coffee, setting down his cup, and tightening a hinge because doors deserve to work.